we're back at it again. All it takes is like one comment, and you don't have to force my hand. I'm gonna make another Rainbow Brite video. If you forgot, this is what Rainbow Brite is about.
Into a land filled with darkness came a little girl with a mission. After proving herself to be worthy and brave, she became known as Rainbow Brite. Now, along with her magnificent horse Starlight and her loyal and true friends Twink and the Color Kids, she lives far away in Rainbow Land, a wonderful place full of color and happiness. Using the power of the rainbow, her magical color belt, and the star sprinkles, Rainbow Brite and her friends protect Rainbow Land, fighting off the forces of darkness and gloom and the devious plots of Murky and Lurky, so that they can bring color and happiness to people everywhere.
And that plays at the beginning of every single episode. For this video, I wanted to do the next 3 episodes in the series, which I refer to as like the Brian saga or the Brian series, because they introduce a boy from Earth named Brian, and he kind of is along for the ride in Rainbow Land. I don't like him, and it's clear. I inserted him into today's drawing as like a half effort. With these next few episodes, this is sort of where like the implications and like my theories start. And you'll see. So buckle up. We're in for some crazy lore drops coming in. But because Rainbow Brite is sort of catching on to this 90s, 80s nostalgia, at Five Below, they have these Rainbow Brite blind box keychains that I got just to open up on this video. Honestly, I would be happy with any of them, because they're all really cute. And so I'm going to open it up on video. And there were Hello Kitty and Strawberry Shortcake ones of these, and I practiced restraint. Alright? So we're going to open it up. I've never done a blind box before. This is kind of fun. Okay. I didn't know they would be hard. I thought they'd be like soft. Try to open this. But I can see who it is. Oh, he's so cute! It's Lurky! Oh my goodness. He's so adorable. I love him. But he's like hard. I'm going to go close to the camera so you guys can see. Isn't he adorable? This is Lurky. He's like a fuzzy guy. Oh, he's so cute. Well, with that, I present to you the drawing that I made and the next 3 episodes in the Rainbow Brite series. Once again, I am going to briefly touch on the drawing before I get into talking about the episodes. For this drawing, I did ask a few people for some ideas, and while looking for reference images, I found the super cute lunchbox along with a matching thermos with a drawing of Rainbow Brite and Red Butler and the sprites having a cute little picnic. I thought so seasonal, and it kind of ties into the episodes in like a very loose way, because Red Butler is featured a little more heavily in these episodes of the Brian saga. So the Brian saga begins with an episode called Peril in the Pits. Peril in the Pits opens up on Earth, and we meet Brian, who is the world's saddest 11-year-old boy. He just tried out for the baseball team, and he didn't make it, and he's super bummed out. Rainbow Brite is also on Earth. She is riding around in the sky on Starlight, and she sees Brian. She wants to cheer him up, and she makes a big rainbow and says, "He'll be happy if he only sees the rainbow." I really love the logic that these kinds of shows use. I think it's super great. Brian gets kind of distracted, and he ends up walking through the rainbow and becomes colored as if he has walked out of a bad case of the stripes. Rainbow Brite then comes down and introduces herself, and she has to take Brian to Rainbow Land to get the colors off of him. It is brought up here that Brian is the first outsider that has ever been brought into Rainbow Land, which is just sort of like a fun little fact. Then back in Rainbow Land, we see Murky and Lurky are villains of the series. We are no longer involved with the evil King of Shadows, it's just Murky and Lurky from now on. They have a plot to steal Rainbow's belt. Murky wants to remove all the color from the world and make everyone gloomy. This is sort of his thing, and it's just the way that he is for the whole series. Murky and Lurky get spotted by a sprite who goes to the mines to tell the color kids. Now, the sprites work in the mines. That's where they are when we meet them. They're happy and they want to be there. The color kids are also there, which is sort of unusual for them. I feel like later in the series they don't spend as much time actually in the color mines. But this sprite comes and warns them that they saw Murky and Lurky snooping around. Red Butler decides that he's going to take care of them, and the rest of the color kids are like, yeah, me too, because they're there also. So Murky and Lurky hide in the bushes outside of the color castle. And while they're there, Murky reveals that he has a gloom cloud that's essentially going to make Rainbow Brite so gloomy that she's going to lose the will to resist him and just hand her belt over. So the color kids come back from the mines to Rainbow Land and meet up with Rainbow at the door of the color castle and tell her that Murky and Lurky are in Rainbow Land. But what's this? Murky and Lurky are already there. They pounce. Murky tries to use his gloom cloud, but Rainbow easily disperses it with a rainbow from her belt. And that's sort of the end of that interaction. Murky then decides he's going to capture the color kids. So he sprays the color kids with the gloom cloud when they go back to the mines, which is where they want to be. And they just sort of complacently walk with Murky into like capture. Rainbow ends up removing the colors from Brian. I know everyone was super concerned about that. And then learns about the color kids' capture. And the ransom, bum bada bum, is her color belt. I will note here that when I say that the color kids are captured, I mean that Red Butler, Canary Yellow, Patio Green, and Indigo are captured. For some reason, Shy Violet and Lala Orange are not with them. My personal headcanon is that they didn't fall for the gloom cloud and they're still in the mine somewhere where they want to be. So Rainbow's like, I have to go rescue the color kids. And Brian says, I guess I'm in on this too. And he goes with her. This is the first of many situations that Brian just sort of inserts himself in where he doesn't belong. And I'm just going to say, don't think that I don't see how he mounts Starlight. He moves Twink out of the way so he can sit behind Rainbow. He might be 11, but I can see what he's doing. Rainbow, Twink, Brian, Starlight, they all enter into Murky's territory, which we learn is called the Pits. They discover, while they're there, that Starlight and Rainbow's powers don't work in the pits. So Starlight can't fly, Rainbow's rainbows don't work. They kind of crash land, and Murky is able to set up a trap by making a large amount of quicksand look like water. He does this by using a blue star sprinkle, which are like the resources that the color kids use to make colors. And this sort of quicksand scheme checks off another box in our 80s cartoon environment bingo. I hope you guys are playing along at home. When they crash land, Starlight, the horse, decides that they need a bath and they go straight to the quicksand. So Starlight's struggling in the quicksand, and Brian decides they're going to form a human sprite chain to rescue Starlight. But since Starlight is like a full horse, Starlight pulls Rainbow in, and Rainbow takes off her belt so that she can reach Brian, and Brian and Twink can pull a human girl and a horse out of quicksand. Rainbow taking off her belt was Brian's suggestion. Everybody remember this. This is why I don't like Brian. So Brian and Twink are able to pull them out, and almost immediately, this group is scooped into a cage in the back of Murky and Lurky's car. And since Rainbow's rainbow belt is off, Murky just walks up and takes it. So Murky has the color belt, and he wears it and storms the color castle. He blasts Rainbow Land with his belt and removes all the color. And our heroes, they get unceremoniously dumped into a hole with the captured color kids. This really is the pits. It seems that the pits have a serious impact on everyone's ability to believe in themselves and mental health, except, of course, for Rainbow and, for some reason, Brian. And Brian gives like a 2 sentence, let's get unmurked pep talk, and suddenly everyone's right back to normal and they devise a plan. Their plan is to get out by having Starlight sort of kick Twink up and out of the hole so that he can use like a crank to lower something down and help them escape. Murky is then preparing more of his gloom cloud in a hot air balloon to get ready to spread it across the world. But the kids are able to come and attack him, and in their fight, Brian is able to get the belt off of Murky. Rainbow puts it back on. She defeats him. Everyone's super happy, and everything turns back to normal, and Brian is taken back to Earth. And then Brian and Rainbow Brite have like a weirdly flirtatious goodbye, which causes issues later. All right. So that's the end of Peril in the Pits. The next part of this Brian series is a 2-parter episode called The Mighty Monstro-Merc Menace. So, The Mighty Monstro-Merc Menace, Part 1. We start in the pits. Here, Murky is tormenting something called Monstro-Merc, which is like a cloudy guy with a mustache who's in like a bottle. And then like an errant strike of lightning releases Monstro-Merc from his cage, and he's able to escape and hops out of Murky's castle and over to Rainbow Land. While in Rainbow Land, the color kids, who are having a potato sack race, discover the Monstro-Merc. And they seem to know what it is. Indigo picks it up and she's like, what the heck is this? Shy Violet, who is the smart one, says it's the Monstro-Merc, and Indigo replies, it still exists. It's been over 700 years since they tried to destroy Rainbow Land. Which kind of brings into question 2 possibilities. And this is where the implications of Rainbow Brite start. The 2 possibilities are that Monstro-Merc has been around for 700 years, and the color kids are aware of its existence, but were not around when it was trying to destroy Rainbow Land. Or the much more interesting one, and I think the one that I'm going to lean towards, is that the color kids and Rainbow Land are at least 700 years old. If they know Monstro-Merc and are saying it's been over 700 years since it's tried to destroy Rainbow Land, and we were around for all of Rainbow Land, I think they have to be at least 700 years old. I'm leaning towards immortal color kids. That's just me. Murky figures out that the monster Murk escaped, comes over and sprays the kids with gloom, and they all pass out, and Murky leaves with Monster Murk still in its bottle. Murky and Lurky take the Monster Murk back to the lair. Murky sort of gives like a little exposition on Monster Murk, and says that they have an electromagnetic force that can take the color away from everything, which is just more pseudoscience that the series is trying to throw in. Lurky attempts to make sure that the bottle's cork remains on, but ends up sort of sticking it directly through into the bottle, and the monster Murk is able to escape. He's mad at Murky for tricking him into the bottle 700 years ago, which I think boosters my side that the people in this series are at least 700 years old, because that means if Murky tricked Monster Murk into the bottle 700 years ago, Murky has to be at least 700 years old, if not older, obviously. And if he's been beefing with the Color Kids and Rainbow Brite and Colors for so long, I have to be more inclined towards the immortality side of this argument. So Monster Murk then traps Murky in the bottle until Murky makes him ruler of the pits, and Murky is spineless and gives in immediately, obviously. The Color Kids then wake up from getting sprayed and send a distress signal over to Rainbow Brite, who's off on Earth. While on Earth, Rainbow Brite decides to go say hi to her Earth friend, Brian. And she's like, "Oh, I'll help out with your earthly tasks, Brian." But he doesn't want help from a girl. This kind of confuses Rainbow Brite. It seems like she doesn't really get what Brian is getting at or like where he's coming from. My theory is that misogyny doesn't exist in Rainbow Land. But regardless, while on Earth, Rainbow gets the distress signal, and then suddenly Brian wants to go with them. Rainbow's like, "You have your job, I have mine. Let's just go our separate ways." But she ends up giving him a magic key so that he can come to Rainbow Land whenever he feels like it. Of course, after Rainbow and crew leave, Brian rushes to deliver all of his newspapers so that he can get back to Rainbow Land and help out. Because he wants to feel like he's needed. Back in Rainbow Land, Monster Murk starts attacking. The Color Kids can only stand there because, as Shy Violet puts it, without Rainbow, they're helpless. Monster Murk then tries to take the rainbow out from under Starlight, as Starlight's taking Rainbow Brite back to Rainbow Land. But with the help of Rainbow's belt, she easily combats the effect. But Monster Murk ends up doing the same thing to Brian's rainbow that he's using to get to Rainbow Land, and it starts to crumble underneath him. But don't worry, Rainbow Brite saves him from falling to his death. "I'm sorry, Brian. I thought you didn't want help from a girl." So the Color Kids then inform Rainbow that the problem is Monster Murk, and Rainbow is like, "Oh, I thought we had seen the end of it." Even though Monster Murk has been locked up for 700 years. She says the word "we," which only helps my theory that they are all immortal. But we saw the beginning of Rainbow Land, so that also puts into question, has there been 700 years between the last two episodes and now? There's too much stuff happening here, and I think Hallmark really needs to get someone like on this to like figure it out. It's too confusing. Brian obviously is convinced that he could take on the monster Murk. And then whoop-de-doo, Red Butler comes in and he's like, "I can handle the monster Murk. Don't worry, everybody. I'm a boy." But Rainbow and friends decide that the best thing they can do for now is mitigate the damage, and they all go to the mines to get some star sprinkles. While on their way there, Red Butler tries to scare Brian away by describing the monster Murk as like really scary. It's kind of unclear what Red's beef with Brian is, but I think I have a theory. And so Rainbow Brite's plan is to make a giant rainbow wall to protect them from Monstermerc. And then Brian like wanders through the mines because he's useless. The wall works against Monstermerc, and his power can't get through. This is our first act victory. The kids decide that now that they've saved the day, it's time to take a nap and rest, and then they're going to pick back up on defending the world later. But they need someone to keep watch while they go to bed. Buddy Blue suggests that Red Butler does it, and everyone kind of agrees. And then Rainbow Brite notices, because she's like an empath and so amazing, that Brian clearly needs something to do. So she suggests that Brian keeps watch instead. This is probably like the main error and judgment that Rainbow Brite ever has. She's usually pretty flawless, she's pretty logistical, she's pretty logical. She knows what she's doing. But she's trying to be nice to Brian for some reason and says he can keep watch. Back in the pits, Monstermerc tells Murky and Lurky, go capture Rainbow Brite. I don't like the shenanigans she's pulling. And Brian, while keeping watch, gets attacked, and Murky is able to sneak in and capture Rainbow Brite in the magic bottle, and they run away with her. This is the end of part 1. Part 2 starts, and I want to note here that I'm pretty sure that the voice actor for Murky changed between part 1 and part 2. I have not been rewatching these in one sitting, so I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the voice actor is different. Not someone sitting on continuity on these guys. So Brian is running after the villains who have Rainbow, but he trips and falls. Woe is him. But then we pan over, and everyone who was once sleeping is running up behind him and is like, what happened? And he's like, they took Rainbow. Rainbow here starts to do like something in the bottle that causes it to glow, and Murky kind of freaks out. The color kids decide that they're going to go after Rainbow, and Starlight takes them over to the Rainbow River, which leads into the pits. If we remember, a different river that led into the pits, the No Return River, in fact, I think the rest of this is going to become pretty clear, at least like the reasoning of why it happened. They get to the river, and there's a boat there waiting for them, obviously, because this is a cartoon. Red Butler, Brian, and Twink get into the boat. Apparently, it's too dangerous for the other colored kids. And so Starlight is like, you guys stay here, because Starlight is in charge now. Buddy Blue tells Red Butler that he's going to stay behind to guard Rainbow Land. And Starlight is too big for the boat, so Starlight can't go in the boat. I'm going to make a note here that earlier I said I had a theory that misogyny didn't exist in Rainbow Land. If my theory is true, then that just means that Buddy Blue and Red Butler are inherently good at their jobs and inherently good at physical tasks, which is why they're the ones that are volunteering for these. But them being boys sort of, I don't know, messes with my theory a bit, and I don't love that. It's a weak theory, but I'd like to think that it's true. Red Butler, Brian, and Twink are in the boat, and while they're rowing, Brian apologizes to Red Butler. He's like, I was getting caught up trying to prove that I was better than you, and this is all my fault. And Red Butler is just like, yeah, it is. And Brian gets super pissed. It's very funny. Back with our villains who have Rainbow. Rainbow is continuing to do like this weird glowy thing, and Murky freaks out and drops the bottle, and it rolls into the river. Murky decides that this sort of takes care of his rainbow problem and wants to focus his attention on sort of controlling the monster Merc. And he leaves Rainbow to sort of like float down the river. But it turns out her like glowing bottle trick is able to pop the cork off of the magic bottle, and she frees herself and runs into Starlight and the red sprite whose name is Romeo. Romeo tells Rainbow about the boys in the river, and she sends the sprite to tell the color kids to start putting star sprinkles in the river. It's sort of unclear why until they start to do it. So Romeo goes, tells the color kids, and the color kids blindly follow Rainbow's instructions, which is a pretty consistent thing about them, but is like a major flaw in their thought process. Like, even Shy Violet, who's supposed to be the smart one, is like, if Rainbow's telling us to do this, she must have a good reason. Which is, I don't know. I don't love that about the oligarchy happening here. So they start doing that. Back to Red Butler and Brian, they're still fighting. It's toxic masculinity at its finest among 11-year-old boys. And the boat crashes into a rock and breaks, and they fall into the river, which is probably to be expected if this used to be the no return river, now called Rainbow River. The river sweeps them into a cave, and this cave leads to a secret lab under Murky's castle, where Murky is trying to find something to control the monstro Murk. Murky and Lurky spot them and seal this cave in, and it starts to flood. And these children are gonna drown. Meanwhile, the color kids are having like an assembly line Star Sprinkle River like song thing, which is pretty fun. And the river ends up turning to solid gold, which calls into question the chemical properties of star sprinkles if they're able to turn the river into solid gold. I digress. Rainbow is able to ride Starlight on top of the river to the cave where Twink, Brian, and Red are, and they're about to drown, obviously. They enter the cave, they save the boys, and Rainbow is able to take energy from the river to get more power to her belt and go spy on Murky and Lurky. Murky was able to create a crown that has been affected by something called a memo ray that will erase the memory of whoever wears it, and he plans to give it to Monstro Murk. It turns out that Monstro Murk is gullible as hell and falls for the whole let me crown you ruler of Rainbow Land bit, and Murky then orders the Monstro Murk to destroy Rainbow Land. During this sort of expose, Lurky retrieves the bottle from the river. Monstro Murk, at the behest of Murky, destroys the Rainbow Wall, and Monstro Murk starts to destroy Rainbow Land as well. Starlight and Rainbow and crew rush to the Star Sprinkles, try and save them, and Monstro Murk is about to shoot the color crystals with his electromagnetic ray. But Brian jumps in the way and gets his own colors zapped, which is probably the best thing he does in this entire series. But Rainbow just sort of easily recolors him, so it wasn't that big of a sacrifice. With the star sprinkles that remain, Rainbow Brite is able to get her belt energized. She goes to fight Monstro Murk with Starlight and defeats him in the similar way that she defeated the evil King of Shadows by blasting it with a big rainbow. Fairly easily, it seems. Like, most of this could have probably been avoided, but whatever. And somewhere in the scuffle, the Monstro Murk gets back in the bottle, and Rainbow takes Brian home. The end. Overall, I think these episodes are pretty fun. You kind of lose the thread a little bit with the introduction of Brian. I know they were like, let's get a guy from Earth in here, let's really ground the show or something like that. But you already have the boy characters of Red and Buddy Blue, and I don't know, I didn't feel like Brian added anything. I feel like maybe Buddy Blue and Red could have had a rivalry, and Buddy Blue could get the screen time he deserved because he was cut from a majority of the first two episodes. Who knows? Who knows? Yeah, in general, I think that I liked these episodes. I liked the inclusion of the sprites and sort of the grandeur of the schemes that Murky and Lurky were coming up with. You'll see in later episodes that they become a little more goofy, which is fine and to be expected for many cartoon villains. But I don't know if the series really keeps up with sort of these first 5 episodes the way I think it should.
Rainbow Brite, see the shining light. Yes, I'm gonna take you to Rainbow Brite. Starlight light right before your eyes, and rainbow colors will cheer you up. Learn to fly. Come on, take it for.
So that is the next 3 episodes in the Rainbow Brite series. I'm going to try and keep better track of my timeline and my theories as I go so that as we go through it, I can compare my notes and stuff. I'm basically treating this as I have a film studies minor and I need to use it somewhere because it sure as heck is not getting a lot of use now. And I definitely think that I want to make a grand finale of the Rainbow Brite movie, which is Rainbow Brite and the Star Stealer, which sounds pretty cool. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and definitely check out the other videos on this channel. Everyone's doing super cool, fun things, and, keep an eye out for more stuff. And leave a comment, what would you do if you were trapped in a bottle for 700 years? Or what would you do if someone came from a different realm and was clearly crushing on your girl? Well, bye.
The world a brighter place. Rainbow Brite and me.
It's quicksand!
Starlight! What are we gonna do?